first off, I just wanted to welcome everyone. So thank you everyone who is joining us, whether you're here with us live or you're watching the recording afterwards. It's great to have all of you here joining with us today. So it's my pleasure to get to introduce all of you to our Fireside Chat member today. So I'd like to take the chance to introduce all of you to Joshua, who is not only an alumni of the DMZ with his company, he is the, what's the correct term, Chief Medical Officer for Figure One, co-founder and Chief Medical Officer of Figure One. So they're DMZ alumni. I think you guys joined the DMZ, when was it? Was it 2011 or 2012? I want to say, or was it 2013
it was like,
maybe?
It was probably December 2012, and we stayed until like April or May 2013. It was like 6 months. So
Wow. And it's hard to think so much time has flown by. So, we really appreciate you, being here and participating in the Hack the Curve program, along with spending some time to give your expertise and knowledge, especially considering not only the company you're working with, but your background as well. And so, we'll dig into that a little bit more as we go through the conversation. But before we really kind of kick things off, I just wanted to kind of take a moment and check in and see how you and the team are doing right now, just with everything that's going on.
Me?
You and the team.
Oh, do you mean, like, when you say team, do you mean the group of folks who are on the call?
Figure One and anyone else that you're working with.
Oh, my team.
Yes, your team, yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Shane. Figure One's doing well. We are in a unique position, not a unique position, but an uncommon position of working to help people gain knowledge in healthcare. Mm-hmm. And so during a pandemic, when things are new and scary and changing often, being in a position where you are helping to disseminate knowledge and cases and conversations happens to mean that you're creating a service that's in demand. Mm-hmm. So we are in the unusual position of most business, like we're opposite to most businesses, where because of the pandemic, a lot of the stuff that folks are doing tends to get shut down, whereas Figure One has been busier than usual because of all the COVID-related content that we're creating, disseminating, making partnerships to deliver, and that's been a really interesting adventure. And I hope that we're able to retain some of those things that we learn and those experiences, and that they'll be relevant beyond the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something that I think a lot of people are thinking about is, there's definitely an opportunity, with the pandemic to be able to do something, but, will this be that kind of like one shot once this is over, whatever over looks like? Is there an opportunity for this to kind of continue and exist beyond the pandemic? And I think, there's different mindsets and different approaches. Some people think it should, you should just do something to help with the pandemic and then move on. Some people may discover that there is something more. And I think that's part of the reason why we have the Hack the Curve program, to really, help everyone who is working on their project right now, discover, is there an opportunity for this to be very COVID specific? If there is, great. Let's see what we can do to help support. If there's an opportunity for this to turn into, something more post-COVID, what's the opportunity there, and how can we really help, support them? But before we get into too much around, talking about the participants of the program, I think it would be great first, Josh, just to give a little bit of background on Figure One, what Sure. It is that you guys are up to, where you started, and then from there, I'm sure a lot of questions will come from my end, and then of course to the audience as well. Feel free to put any questions in. But yeah, why don't you kind of let us know? So what is Figure One, and what is it that you guys are up to right now, and why are you going through so much growth when everyone else is, feeling, potentially the stagnation or the pain of what's going on right now in the world?
All right. So for people who I just assume that everyone knows Figure One, which is dumb because almost nobody, even the people who I'm trying to get to know about Figure One, don't know about Figure One. So the name Figure One comes from the way that in medical journals and textbooks, if there's a picture, underneath that picture, it says, if it's the first one in the first chapter, it says Figure One, and then it says what's in the picture. And that's why it's called Figure One. What it is a platform, an app, a website that lets doctors and other healthcare professionals take medical cases that they're seeing in real life and post pictures, descriptions, and engage in conversations in a social media type platform about the cases that they're seeing or topics that relate to those cases. And this was something that I thought of when I was doing a research position at Stanford right after I graduated. So I'm an intensive care doctor and a general internist. So I still maintain a clinical practice. I've been spending a lot of time in the hospital because of the ICU nature of the pandemic. But even then, I was splitting my time. And what I wanted—
Wait. I just want to take a second. So we have startup founder plus ICU doctor doing both at the same time right now. I think I don't know about everyone else, but I think we need to give Josh a round of applause, because I don't know how the heck you're doing it right now. But thank you so much to not only yourself, but also all of the other frontline workers too for what you're doing, and then also balancing being one of the co-founders of Figure One too. I really don't know how you're doing it right now. So thank you so much, not only to you, but to everyone else as well, for all of the support that you're doing. And of course, this extends to everybody across the world.
Wow, thank you, Shane. I appreciate that. I do it because I'm able to do it because of the help that I have, both in the hospital with the amazing team that I work with there, and the amazing team that we've built at Figure One, and not to mention my family, who are incredibly supportive individuals, even though I would never let them hear me say that.
so Figure One, awesome way to kind of came up with the name with just kind of looking at examples of the textbook. So when did Figure One kind of come into fruition as an idea of, this is something that I think I should develop? When did the eureka moment happen?
I do not believe in eureka moments. I think the eureka moment that people describe is when they it's the last one, right? I think eurekas occur in a series of building steps towards creating something, because nothing drops into your head fully formed. It might feel that way sometimes, and I think people feel proud of themselves, and it's like the myth of the visionary entrepreneur that one day has this idea. No, you've been thinking about it. You had bits and pieces of this idea, because ideas, especially new ones, are just composed of old, recombined, reconfigured ideas that you have either had before or you heard someone else have, and then you modified it yourself. So I don't want to get into the details of that specifically, but I had always been a bit of a strange educator. I wanted to teach med students about ethics when I was a med student, and I wrote a play and got a grant to write a play and had that play published, and we put it on at a conference.
And this was all about ethics in the medical space.
Medical ethics, yeah. I mean, in a nutshell, medical ethics, when you teach them to medical students, don't resonate the same way that they do with adult physicians, because students don't know what they're doing, so they can't picture themselves knowing what they're doing. A lot of ethics is, are you making the right decisions for your patient? But as a student, you don't even know what the right decisions are generally. What are the conventional decisions? What are patients even like? Right? So absent those experiences, you can't imagine that you're a fully qualified physician where you know what you do, where you know what you're doing. Imagining you're knowing what you're doing is what we all pretend we're doing on today. And I thought it would be more useful if we learned ethics from a student perspective, where not only do you not know the right decision, you also don't know anything else. And so that was one example. And there's a bunch of other examples of ways that I wanted to do teaching. And when I finished my residency and my fellowship, I said, I want to do online education. And the department here in Toronto said, we don't know anything about that. We don't have anyone who could supervise that work. We don't know how that would even go.
And this is online education specifically for people who are interested to go into the medical profession.
Yeah, so I mean, as an intensive care doctor, I thought I would start with trying to build a curriculum for the intensive care department that would be as comprehensive as they wanted it to be, but deliver a lot of that curriculum through online interactions. And by the way, this was in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So, creating a weekly summary of articles that you had to read, and you would be able to have a case. There was a lot of stuff that just isn't pulled together. And this is a reminder that in medical education, you only learn about 20% of what you're learning in a classroom situation. I would estimate that 80% or more of your education happens as you see patients, as you talk to them, as you do procedures with your hands, and as you see the results of the work that you've done. That's the learning. You go around with your team, you see patients together, you talk about them together, you see other people doing things, you learn from watching other people. If you work in medical education, you'll know the phrase, see one, do one, teach one, because that is how you learn how to do everything in medicine. You want to learn how to examine somebody's knee, you watch someone do it, then you try it yourself, and then you teach someone else.
Okay. And I'm really glad you're saying that, because the worry that I had was that, you were going to say 80% of the learning is the doctor in the clinic seeing something and then being like, oh my God, and going to Google. I was really worried you were going to say that was the 80%.
No. That is in the 80%. Right? The 80% is the unstructured stuff that you learn by experience, because on-the-job learning is learning by experience. And that's why internships are so powerful, a learning opportunity for people. That's why working with a supervisor who is way better, someone who's an expert at what you want to be an expert at, working next to them is the most fulfilling thing. You get to watch someone who knows what they're doing and just learn from guessing and watching them and getting corrected all day long. That feedback cycle is just flowing into your brain.
And so this is back in 2011 that you wanted to provide this type of online content. And it's amazing to see that, here we are in 2020 where the world has really been forced into doing this right now. And to think that you were thinking about this, 9 years ago, that's crazy to think that even today, we're the world is still trying to adjust to this online educational component for every institution, all the way from early school up to post-secondary, is all kind of wrapping their head around this concept right now. And so, you wanted to develop this online system. U of T said they'd never really thought of it, didn't really know anyone. So was the conversation then we think this is a cool idea, take it and roll with it?
They were like, if you want to do that, okay, but if you want to work with us in this department, probably you should do a master's or a PhD in clinical epidemiology, and then we can have you as an associate, and then decide if you. And I was just like, wait, no, I don't. That's not what I want to do. And one of the things that has been a curse and a blessing for my life is that I generally want to do what I want to do. I'm pretty convinced.
I don't know many entrepreneurs who don't also follow that same ethos as well.
Totally. I just when I feel like I am correct about something, I will stick to it. I'm happy to be proven wrong. So I will take feedback, but I won't I'm not interested in too many people's opinion at that time. If you have data that shows that I've made incorrect assumptions and I'm thus wrong, bring that on. I want to read that because I want to correct my position as soon as possible.
Got you. And so how did this all then result in the concept of Figure One from kind of these conversations you were having?
So I went to Stanford. I got a research position. It's sort of like the position they give you when you're on sabbatical.
Got you.
So I did a sabbatical at Stanford, but I didn't do any work first. Usually people take a sabbatical after almost a decade of doing work. But I started with one. So I went on sabbatical, and I learned I worked and did research about how medical students are using their phones. And what I learned was they were using their phones for everything. And this is not surprising. This is 2012. And people are using their phones for team communication and to teach their patients and to look stuff up. And when we boiled it down, we asked them, what behaviors are you doing? The largest one was, well, we're sharing cases by email, by text. We're like describing what we're seeing. And this, by the way, I want to extend this because it answers a previous question that you asked that I didn't answer, which is the thing that I think I did that was helpful. You were talking about how education is just sort of getting on board with these online strategies now.
I mean, they're really being forced.
Yeah, they are. And one of the things that I think I did was I decided to extend the definition of education, because I definitely have a slightly different definition of knowledge than most people. And so the question was, the learning that these people are doing is not coming from books and lectures. It's coming from talking about cases and seeing medical cases, seeing variations on a theme. And that to me is the core of like how you learn anything, is you see variations on whatever it is, and you learn how to put them together, or you learn how to take them apart, or whatever it is. If you're an engineer, you've got to build dozens or hundreds of versions of a thing before you're really good at building it. If you're a software programmer, you're an engineer, like a software engineer, you need to write hundreds of thousands of lines of code before you're really good at writing code, right? If you're a manager, you've got to manage a bunch of people before you're good at it. Anyone who was ever good at something was bad at it first. You just have to do a lot of it first, and then you get good.
I mean, it's this, the example of the bike. I mean, it's a very simple one.
Yeah, it's simple. But you got to just take the simple thing and be like, this simple thing is true. I can rely on this simple thing. And if you don't ignore it, then you can use it to your power.
And I have to imagine, when you set off on this, research project to look at how students were utilizing technology, in their residency and their practice, I have to imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that perhaps the rules and regulations may have not been set up yet in the way where, people having a WhatsApp group, for example, of nurses or doctors to kind of communicate amongst each other, probably it may have not have been thought about. And so were there scenarios of them sharing this information, in a way that could potentially, not be ethical or be kind of the correct way to do so because of all of the intricacies around security and privacy specific to healthcare and patient information?
That's 100% correct. They were sending it by text and by email mostly, and even, WhatsApp has end-to-end encryption now, but they didn't in 2012, and that means that every bit of that is traceable and also against HIPAA. It's great that you want to share cases, but the way you're doing it is against a shitload of really helpful laws. So really, we need a better solution. And figure one solution was to take those cases and strip out the PHI, the private health information, the stuff that HIPAA and PHIPAA in Canada protect. We stripped out that data, so the cases could be shared as just sort of like generically reported pieces of information, and not like they were people's personal medical information. Right? So that means we don't have names, we don't have hospital numbers, we don't have dates on our platform.
Okay, and so I think what may be helpful for everyone who doesn't have experience with Figure One, kind of walk through an example of what it would look like. And so I'll kind of take a first stab, because this is how I really explain Figure One to a lot of people. And now that I have you here, it's great to see how accurate I am. I always say that there's the opportunity where if you go to a doctor's office and you have a rash or you have a cut and the doctor's never seen anything like this before, through Figure One, they're able to, in a secure platform, take a photo or upload a record or document of someone that's anonymized to say, like, I've never seen anything like this before. Does anyone have any thoughts or help? That's how I've always kind of pitched it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on my probably amateur pitch of Figure One.
No, it's good. I like it. It's what you're describing there is sort of the most appealing description, probably. Like that's sort of
Mm-hmm.
the promise, right? This online digital hospital where you can submit cases and an expert will give you feedback. When you actually build that product, you have to think about how, one, almost nobody is an expert.
Mm-hmm.
Two, there's so many topics in medicine that like you need so many experts because each
Mm-hmm.
expert is only an expert in one topic.
Mm-hmm.
And once you do the economics, you realize actually the place where people are going to get advice is not from experts. It's going to be from people who have happened to have seen this before,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or managed it once or twice. This really like, not to make too much of a curve flattening joke, but like this really flattens the curve of like the experts are way out in like the third standard deviation, but we have access to like the main hump, right? The center of that Gaussian distribution. That's where almost all the people are. And almost like, and certainly in that group, many of them have seen the thing that you've seen before,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that like we're connecting the world's healthcare professionals so that they can talk about whatever it is that they know. Being able to have a platform where you can send a case any time of day or night and gain access to the knowledge of millions of healthcare professionals, that feels like a useful resource.
Mm-hmm. And from my understanding, the community that you've really developed, the idea is, we're all just here because we have this, we have this passion to provide healthcare. And so, for people who will, like, I'll upload the case. For the people who are commenting on the case and saying, I've seen this, I haven't seen that, check out this, is there any type of motivation beyond just wanting to help out? Like, is there anything Figure One does, or is it really just to help support other people in positions where they might not know the answer?
This question is the same question that VCs ask us when they're like, well, wait, why do people use it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of groups. There's not a unified use case. Some of
Okay.
it is I need help. Some of it is I can help. Some of it is I'm curious, and some of it is I'm bored.
Mm.
Right? Why do people like? As much as I don't like when people compare Figure One to Instagram,
I didn't do that on
no,
purpose.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your thoughtfulness. It does. There are some like useful analogies, such as why do people use Instagram?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would you upload pictures of yourself doing stuff?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I still don't exactly know the answer to that, but it's like roughly somewhere in between. Like, I'm bored, and my friends will see it and think it's cool, and I get feedback on my ideas.
I mean, are you telling me that you're not the influencer that I always thought and knew you as? You're doing your hashtag paid posts on Instagram and raking in those dollars. Was it like Christian Ronaldo is making, or Ronaldo's making like $500,000 a post or something like that on Instagram?
Wow.
Something insane
No,
like that.
well, personally, I'm on Twitter, so that's what I use. Um, no, we do have a few people who are like Figure One famous in the
Okay.
community, but I'm not aware that there's any sponsorship opportunities. Plus, the regulation that goes with advertising in a
Hmm.
healthcare environment is extremely rigid.
And
Um,
so, and that makes a total sense. And so, could a way to kind of explain it to perhaps people is, I almost look at Instagram very similar to like Stack Overflow, where like if a developer is having an issue and they're like, how do I overcome this issue, they kind of post it to the community, and there's no financial transaction, there's no type of like,
yeah,
I scratch your back, you scratch my back. It's all just them wanting to help each other out,
mhm.
almost.
Yeah. I think there's an alignment between the purpose, right?
Hmm.
Figure One you might use to help solve a medical problem, whereas Stack you might use to solve a technical problem.
Hmm.
Um, but the difference is that in medicine, the old posts won't necessarily be relevant to your case, and I
Hmm.
know that's true in development too. But like the thing, there's also plenty of times there's no right answer, and plenty of times you
Hmm.
can't find out if your answer was right because the patient left or the person wanted to learn what you thought, but doesn't have access to the patient's chart anymore or that patient.
Mm-hmm.
So like closing the loop is much, much harder in medicine than it is in technology.
Oh, and I can certainly appreciate that. And so, you know, you really developed Figure One then with this idea of being able to be an addition or an extension of education based on what you saw. So when you first started off, you know, what was that like launching Figure One? Did you initially, like, was it a positive reception at first, or did you see a lot of resistance from people who were like posting stuff online? That's like, we can't do that. Like, what was that
Yeah, we
environment
saw
like?
both. We saw both. There wasn't as much resistance as we anticipated. I mean, our third day that the app was in the App Store, we were on the front page of the National Post, which got picked up by Dig, which got picked up by a bunch of
Other
publications.
outlets, yeah. The
Right.
domino effect, yeah.
And so, I mean, this is when Dig was still something.
Mhm.
Right? If you're on the front page of Dig, I don't think anybody would notice now. A few years later, we had the same thing with BuzzFeed, and so
Mhm.
those waves of press just like flooded people, and the opportunity for us to see how our platform got used. And we built a bunch of features because we recognized they were missing, like
Mhm.
making putting all photos in a queue so that we could review them before they were posted. That was
Mhm.
maybe the first feature built after release,
Mhm.
because you can
Mhm.
imagine, right? People were posting stuff about like politics in Brazil and how their president has a colon for a brain. Like, you know, right? No one else. We want to keep it relevant. We want to be able. We want to be able to say as a platform that we respect our users and that we
Mhm.
know what they want. We know what they like, and that means giving them like professionalized content and
Mhm.
making sure that there isn't clickbait or misinformation. And so all of our posts are still reviewed for privacy reasons, but also
Mhm.
like we have to do it for privacy reasons, but we also get to do it for quality reasons.
Mhm. No, and it makes total sense. And so, you know, because you were, you know, so because the community that you had, you know, was definitely so important to the business. Once again, it made total sense that you wouldn't want someone to turn Figure One into their own version of Facebook with a more curated community of people who all were under the same profession. So,
Yeah.
Figure One launched, you had kind of mixed receptions. So walk us through kind of, you know, where you guys are today. So this was launched, you know, almost a decade ago, which is crazy to think about. But
Bizarre.
where is Figure One today in terms of, you know, whether it's your growth, how big you are, how many people you have on the platform? I'm sure people would love to hear kind
Yeah.
of the success you've seen over
So,
the past little bit.
I mean, we have approximately 3 million healthcare professionals on the platform around the world in 190 something countries. I don't think it's available in Iran, North Korea. I have to check on Cuba. I don't remember.
Hmm.
But we're available in every other country. We support 70 something languages per patient, because there's a consent form built in for patients to sign a consent form.
Hmm.
The app itself is available only in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Um, and um, the the growth was like dominant in the first 5 years.
Hmm.
I would say the past 2 years, 2.5 years has been really like stabilization. So now that we've recognized what our business model is, which is
Hmm.
we create sponsored content for industry, for non-governmental organizations, and for biopharmaceutical companies.
Hmm.
This is like the same way that native ads came to Facebook and Instagram. I don't know when, 5 years ago. Uh,
Hmm.
we followed that and brought it to healthcare, and because everything in healthcare moves slower, we were there early.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
right, that's the interesting thing about healthcare. Whenever you're building a business that feeds into healthcare, um, healthcare is 5 to 10 years behind on technology, which means you can use technology from the future, i.e., now, in your own stack, but don't try to hand somebody something that is too futuristic, because it won't there won't be any they won't have the lead up, the run up. There won't be the pre-existing landscape for you to like set your things down on.
And this really
Right.
goes back, and that's a great point. And this really goes back to one of the previous talks we had earlier with you must know him, Balaji from MedStack, where he was talking about how if you go to a hospital, whether it's the CIO and you're bringing this unproven technology, it really could be their career if they were to implement it and something were to happen. And then of course, because it is in healthcare, if something were to happen, like the happen could be devastating, whether it's
Yeah.
patient's information getting released, whether it's something getting misdiagnosed, lost in the wires. There's just it's a lot different than just my Uber arrived at the wrong address. Like, it sucks, but
Right.
it's like the world will still continue. You just have to wait a little bit longer for your Uber to get there. And so I'm really curious, because this is a conversation that I've definitely had with a lot of the teams that we're working with Hack the Curve, thinking about the audience that you really have, these 3 million individuals, doctors, nurses, etc. How did you actually, market yourself to them? How did you actually grow Figure One? What was the strategy there? Because, they're inundated, and their eyeballs are definitely one of the most valuable eyeballs, especially today with everything going on. But beyond that, how did you actually go out and talk to these doctors and get them on board with this idea, with everything else kind of going on in their lives? And this is even ignoring, like, COVID-19 wasn't happening in
Right.
2014, 2015.
Right. It was right after SARS, though. So. No, it
True.
wasn't. It wasn't that close. But people knew. Anyway, the point is, we've had growth success from a few different avenues, and they're all a bit challenging to replicate. One was we had good press hits. We had some good things in the press. That piece in the National Post. A few years later, we were on the front page of BuzzFeed.
And was
And
that proactive on your end? Was that you or someone on your team reaching out, or was that them just kind of stumbling upon you?
no, all the big press pieces were not of our own doing. No, National Post was. We called and arranged the interview. BuzzFeed was not ours. We were on. I don't know if you know the podcast Reply All. Um, it's a Gimlet podcast. Anyway, it's about the internet.
Hmm.
They're a popular podcast. We were their second episode.
Oh, wow.
And we've been on a few other pieces of media that have gotten like quite a lot of distribution. And I
Hmm.
think that that comes from, I think, a careful job thinking about what story do we believe is one that is compelling about Figure One.
And what was that story to National Post? And I'm just saying this because, there's a lot of companies in this program who see the press as being that way to get that publicity out there. So how did you approach them to say, this is a story that's worth telling to your audience at the National Post?
I mean, it was, look, there's nothing like this that exists. We're pushing some boundaries because people may not be ready for this kind of sharing. But if you just look at the purpose, you can see immediately how it solves many, many problems in healthcare instantly. Distance,
Mhm.
gone. Bureaucracy of sharing cases and signatures, gone. Right? You just share a case, submit it, and people can see it. You can send it to people. It's sometimes harder to get records like to the hospital across the street
Mhm.
compared to sending them to the Mayo Clinic, right? So if you can give everybody access, then you've effectively democratized access.
Mhm.
And so the thing that we said was, there's no reason why anybody in the world should be beyond the reach of medical expertise if you
Mhm.
have an internet signal. The
Mhm.
knowledge you need in the moment you need it. And you
Mhm.
can get that anywhere in the world where you can get the internet. And we can give it to every healthcare professional in the world, and it's free. So who's ready for this?
Yeah, I could definitely see how some outlets would really want to capitalize this. And then, so for all of our participants, I think it's definitely thinking about, what is it that you're doing today that's unique and innovative that people should know about? And then how can you really help, tell that story to whoever it is you're talking to, the journalist, etc., remembering that you really want to talk about your story, but how can you make sure that it also aligns with the kind of view that the journalist is looking for, in the sense that it's a compelling story in their eyes. To, I think a lot of people kind of get in that trap where they think everything they do is worth a press release and a news article, but really kind of taking that opportunity to think, is this story really that newsworthy, and would my friend, family member, etc., reading it in the paper be like, oh wow, that's really cool, I should follow up and look into this in a little bit more detail.
Shane, do you ever hear the Jeff Bezos style of writing press releases? Do you know about that?
I've heard of it, and I've definitely seen some before, but for our audience, what is that style?
So you basically, before you sit down and you decide what your company's going to do about a particular problem, or maybe do in general if it's a brand new company, you write the press release first. And then you you write it in something that you believe in, that is a compelling story. And then you're like, great, that's what we have to build. Everybody, make this press release. We're gonna release this press release in 3 months. Make this true. You have 3 months.
Is that what you guys were doing too? Have you taken that style on at Bigger One as well?
So I mean, I don't take it literally, but we take it in spirit by basically saying, if we want to be able to describe that there's something compelling here, know what that is. Find out if it's compelling before you go ahead and do it. Test the idea. Make sure that you're not wrong and that you're not up your own ass. Because I don't mean any offense. I don't think anyone in your audience is anyone who's done this specifically with me. But I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who come in and they sort of want to chat about their idea, or they want advice or whatever. And they're so obsessed with their idea, but it is not interesting.
And I think that's one of the things I consistently tell anyone, whether it's a part of this hackathon, the DMZ, the amount of times that I've seen people, come in with an idea and be very passionate about it, but really build it in a silo with that assumption of, if we build it, they will come. And then especially in the healthcare industry, where there are a lot of, rules, regulations, and intricacies that, unless you have experience in it, you wouldn't necessarily know. Be surprised when they release this to the market and don't get the reception or the feedback that they really are looking for. And so one of the biggest challenges that a lot of our folks are facing right now, Josh, is how do I talk to some of these people? So if I am looking to sell my solution to a clinic or to a hospital, they're so busy right now. Like how would you recommend our folks kind of handling this? Because you want to talk to them, but you also don't want to distract them from the important work that they're doing too.
No problem. I'm going to give you a way to think about it that will help you solve each problem, even because each of these problems are unique. I bought my home a long time ago, and not that long, but it feels like a long time ago now. And
February feels like a long time ago.
It's true. And I was talking about it with my dad, and we were hiring a contractor, and my dad was a lawyer, and he did a lot of litigation against people who were unhappy with their contractor. And I said, what do you think I should do about some of these issues? And he said, the issue we were talking about with the contractor, did they have insurance? And I said, well, I just want him to confirm that he has it. And my dad said, no, get him to photocopy his insurance certificate and send it to you. And I was like, well, why do I need to get him to do all that? It sounds really a lot of extra. And he was like, well, then you don't have to worry about it. Then you'll know. And so that idea of then you'll know is one of the things that you'll want to do when you're thinking about what business to pursue. This is something that I advise almost every company, because not a lot of product companies do this early enough, is go out, find somebody who wants to buy the thing you're selling, get them to tell you how much they would pay for it, and then you'll know. Don't build something that you're sure will get sold and then go out and find somebody who's going to buy it. Because guess what? You made that whole thing up in your head. There's no reason why that should be based in reality. Go out first, not before you start the company, but say, all right, I have a solution for X, Y, Z. The thing that will take you as long to build as the product is the business. And the business is you networking, you calling, you emailing, you knocking on doors. Well, now not knocking on doors, but emailing and calling at least. And
Zooming
doing it
on
in
monitors, is that the new knocking on doors?
that knocking sound from Slack when you send
Yeah.
somebody a message is what I get now. Go out and get proof that somebody wants to buy this. And then you can start making it, and you haven't spent like any time building something that no one's going to want. Prove it so you don't have to figure it out later.
Yeah, the whole issue of people kind of developing a problem, or sorry, developing a solution for a problem that doesn't exist is something that I've seen, especially when you do have people who, you know, whether they're from the academic field or not, who develop an incredibly highly technical solution that, you know, is amazing in a lab environment, but in actual like real world practicality might not necessarily do what people needed to actually do. I've seen that happen time, and I'm sure you must have in your experience too.
And by the way, we've done it. We've made that mistake too. So like no one's immune, obviously. Or if they are, I'm not immune. But like, so there's a startup business professor who works at Columbia. He's well known. His name is Steve Blank, and he's written books and he gives talks. Anyway, he was one of my co-founder's business teachers, and we took one lesson like to heart that we actually went out and actually performed the experiment, which is see if you can get people to give you their money, or see if you can get them to try to buy your product, even though they can't because it doesn't exist yet. So we set up a website for a side version of Figure One that does not exist today because the test wasn't sufficiently positive. But we built a website for it, and we basically said, here's a credit card form, and when you put your card in and when you went to pay, the web page says, the service is not currently available in your area. You have not been charged. We will email you when the service becomes available. And yeah, it's a bit of a trick because there was no service for anywhere. I mean, it wasn't available in any area. But we knew exactly how many people wanted to buy this thing that we were wondering if we should create. And that's Steve Blank's trick. Go out and see how many credit card numbers. You need people to give you their credit card numbers, not tap on the I would like this button. Because people, and this is not Steve Blank, this is Steve Jobs, people don't know what they want. You want to know what people want? Get them to prove it to you by acting that way. You don't want people saying and raising their hand in a focus group saying, I would buy that. You want people trying to buy it. That's the proof.
I think it goes back to that saying of people, you vote with your wallet at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm much more behavioral about it, right? I think you vote with your wallet is the version of that for money, but there's lots of actions and activities that you want to know if people will do or wanting to do. So you want to know if people will do it? Well, here's a question. Are they doing it?
And I think like a lot of people aren't sure right now, and they're making a lot of assumptions, as you said, and especially as, you know, when you start to get into kind of more complex environments like the healthcare system where there's so many different stakeholders. You know, I've seen that trap of just kind of making assumption upon assumption upon assumption where the hospital will buy it to force the doctors or nurses to use it for the patients to benefit from it. And I feel like they don't realize that there's so many different sticky points or places where things could potentially get halted or stall that completely throws every other assumption that they have out the window. And it can, I mean,
you want to build your business and your company and your product on as few assumptions as possible, because you have to make some. But if it turns out you built it on you made 30 assumptions and it turns out that 6 of them are wrong, I bet you're like 2 years into using the same assumptions over and over again. You're going to be wrong, right? It's math.
And appreciate that perspective. And so I want to switch gears slightly just to respect the time that we have. So, you know, with everything that you're seeing, not only with your work with Figure One, but also, you know, the work that you're doing in the intensive care units, you know, what are some of the kind of trends or things that you're really noticing or seeing that would be important for people who are participating in this hackathon to know about, in the sense, like, are you surprised that there isn't a company doing something today that would alleviate a huge issue or a huge barrier perhaps you yourself or any of your colleagues are facing right now, beyond, say, like, having more PPEs?
Right. I mean, healthcare professionals are overloaded right now, and what I've seen is people developing, like, taking the things that are hard to do and making them easier for certain groups of people. Healthcare professionals are a good group to aim at because right now they're still at work, they're still getting paychecks, and they're still going in and out of places. But they're like I don't remember what it was. It was in the States. Somebody set up a grocery store in the empty parking lot of a hospital because there's no visitors allowed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So healthcare professionals can go like grocery shopping in this tent of a grocery store
Mm-hmm.
before they get in their cars and they go back home.
Wow, that's really cool. That's a
Um,
really cool story. I hadn't heard about that.
no, but it's like it exemplifies the fact that there's still so many different opportunities. If I
Mm-hmm.
could if I was to identify the one opportunity that is a hard one, but exists for anyone who's wondering how to help out during the pandemic, help
Mm-hmm.
restore the economy, and also create a successful business, that business will be in logistics. The business will be in
Logistics.
logistics, converting every store that is currently closed to being currently open and serving the same number of people that they were serving 6 weeks ago. And I don't know where all the logistics companies are, but now's your time, logistics
Mm-hmm.
companies. Get out there. Like, how come everything is not, like, how come there aren't teenagers dropping everything off, driving cars because their summer break started a month ago, like started a month early,
Mm-hmm.
and doing curbside. I don't want to do curbside pickup at stores. I want curbside pickup at my
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
house. So, like, where is every single business on this? Everyone's
Yeah.
relying on Uber and Amazon. There's like 30 layers between them and the floor. So, like, people should just get in there and mix it up. See what you can do. Every
Mm-hmm.
business needs help right now, and every person looking for a business has a job if you want to work in logistics.
Mm-hmm. And I've definitely seen that explosion. I mean, you're seeing it. I think it was what, Instacart's looking to hire 100,000 people or something like that to keep up with the demand. I have to imagine.
That's a whole other company.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But a
That's three companies.
perfect example of like where the industry is going. And yeah, we've definitely seen a few people tackle that problem kind of, I want to say, like 3 or 4 years ago, but that was probably when the market wasn't ready for it. And now it really is, in a sense that people are just once again forced to have to adopt to this type of change. And so, a question that I want to ask for you then is, there's a lot more kind of flexibility being given in the healthcare space right now, because, there's always that need to kind of balance speed, but then safety and privacy. But it seems like there's some concessions that are getting made. So, you can communicate with consent via text or other alternative means now. Do you see the healthcare space, though, adopting these policies in the future, or do you see them kind of retreating back and saying, once this pandemic is over, we're going to continue to kind of operate the way things are? I would hope not, but in your kind of thoughts, what do you see the healthcare space changing because of everything that's coming to light right now, and all the the inefficiencies because of how slow they are too?
There's a lot of change that is happening, and the only way for us to know what's going to happen next is to wait to see what happens next.
Hmm.
Predictions about the future are challenging, right? What did they say? Predictions are hard, especially about the future.
What's your
Um,
vision for the future is perhaps the better way to put it. Where do you see things going in your experience and your perspective?
Things that are successful and continue to provide value after the pandemic will be grandfathered in, or they'll find a way to make it work. These rules that like typically keep small companies outside of hospitals aren't written down anywhere. No one actually like says this technology is too new, and they're going to go back and check the newness of each technology after the pandemic. What's going to happen is they're going to like look around and see if they're still getting value from the stuff that they bought when they panicked. And if you're still providing value and you're able to adapt into a non-pandemic like what you want is now's the time for people to sign up for your free trial, so that way they're paying customers before the pandemic is over, and they love your product and want to keep
Mhm.
it on their shelf or in their on their servers.
Mhm. And so, what do you look at as being the primary value drivers for healthcare? Once again, whether it's for a hospital or for, a doctor, because there's common trends, increase efficiency, decrease costs, improve revenue. What do you see as kind of being the biggest drivers for someone to make decisions to say this is something we need to keep doing because it helps us in one of these areas we need support?
What's the biggest factor that helps hospitals make decisions right now?
Like, what's the
I guess
biggest kind of value that you could say, and they're like, yes, like we're on board because this solves such a huge kind of like issue for us. Is it increasing efficiency?
it
Maybe,
would be.
maybe.
I would say it's something that lets you use the resources you have to go further.
Mhm.
So things that extend your staff because you're short staffed. Things that extend your PPE because you're running out of PPE. Things that reduce the number of people you have to have coming in because there's risk to even coming to the hospital if it's just for a meeting or whatever. So things that let you do more
Mhm.
in each of those areas. Extenders.
And
That's
and
my
I'm
theme.
and I'm really looking at kind of the example of Figure One as being that perfect kind of, people were communicating via text, WhatsApp, whatever before, and you basically just gave them a platform that allowed them to continue to do this just in a, you know, ethically and regulation wise,
Well, there's one more
approved
thing
way.
that we do. We save
Mhm.
and make public every piece of content,
Oh,
which means
really?
all these cases and those discussions are available for other people to learn from. You learn from other people's expertise. Those
Mhm.
cases stay useful,
Mhm.
right? So we like every case that we've had. I mean, I'm sure there are a couple that use obsolete technologies because time moves forward, but not that many, right? Like
Mhm.
our cases are more or less evergreen. Um, and so if you can make something evergreen, um,
Yeah, and
that's
that's a huge component of it too, is taking away these
valuable.
one-to-ones, like me asking a friend for support, and then basically showing that conversation or that dialogue of, this was the conclusion for people to benefit from and read from. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so I'm recognizing that we're getting closer to time here. So just to kind of wrap things off with one last question, just kind of curious to know your thoughts in terms of, where's Figure One going with all of this stuff. You and I were kind of talking a little bit before about,
Yeah,
what's been going on in Figure One's world. So, for the rest of the audience, kind of how's Figure One kind of going through the next few months or potentially even years with this pandemic in mind?
right. So we're lucky because people share cases and information and teach each other on Figure One, and so we're hoping that to continue capitalizing on that. Luckily, business has been supportive too because doctors are still all at work, so that's good. But what I want to make sure that we do is that we don't throw out any of the opportunities that we've been given to learn new things, to try new variations on stuff that we weren't trying before. The same way the hospitals are trying new things that we're trying before. This is a, I don't know if it's unprecedented, but certainly a rare opportunity to try new things and learn from them. And what that means, by the way, this is like a startup thing, right? Like make mistakes or fail fast or whatever it is.
Move fast and
Um,
break things. Yeah, all of
right.
those. Yeah.
All that.
Hmm.
It's not bullshit, but it's not correctly expressed most of the time.
Hmm.
Make mistakes, and every time you make a mistake, put your mistake into your progress, encode the correction to that mistake in your process, so you never make that mistake again.
Hmm.
And if we've had a lot of people leave Figure One, right? We've been around for 7 years or something. Right, our employee retention has been excellent, right? Our developers are staying for like 3, 4, 5 years, which is
Hmm.
certainly longer than most people, and same with a bunch of other folks. But 7 years is longer than almost. There's still a few originals, but not that many. Um, and every time one of those people leaves, they leave with 3-4 years of knowledge that some of it's written down and some of it's not, and they put some of it into progress and some of it's not. And a lot of those people I wish I could still reach and ask, hey, what happened with that case,
Mm-hmm.
with that project, with that partner, with that piece of
Mm-hmm.
business? Didn't we encounter this before? I can't remember everything myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Save your learnings. They are the things that make your company go. This is why Amazon has done this really well, and I believe that is why they've been able to continue to be successful year after year after year. Is they don't let their learnings walk out the door. If they make a mistake, they fix it and make the fix the way you have to do that thing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't let your mistakes go to waste. And right now, we have the opportunity to try things we were never even considering trying before. Now's
Mm-hmm.
your opportunity to like do variations on a theme, see other versions of your idea, modify your idea in a way that you didn't expect to, and see what parts get traction. The way your business will succeed is you'll find you're successful at doing one thing, and it will spill over into an adjacent thing. It might not be the thing you're aiming for, but wherever you see success that starts to be more than you can handle or more than you expected, keep pouring your resources into that one ability so that way it spills over into something adjacent, and then you focus on getting that capacity up to speed until it flows over into something adjacent to that, until eventually it's flowing either direction that where you want, or it just keeps expanding. And like, who cares? You started out as a business that was going to like do travel monitoring. Now you're doing something to do with footwear, and who cares? You found something extremely useful, unique, and successful. That's what you want. Again, your idea is not the one that's special. It's probably your ability to like
Execute.
execute. Well, yeah, execute meaning goal seek towards success.
Mm-hmm. And
Right?
and you know what? I think that is a really great point to kind of summarize everything, and definitely something we're really encouraging a lot of people to do. Is this is really a time where there's a lot of growth. A lot of people are uncomfortable, but I think people perhaps are more they're more willing to see you try something new and make a mistake and have a learning. Once again, this is all relative to how big that mistake may be, but I think people are a little bit more flexible, that not everything is going to go to plan. Everyone is adjusting to this new world right now. And because we are in this phase of adjustment, this is the chance to kind of do that tweak, try that experiment that you may not have been able to do before, because
Yeah.
people are perhaps a little bit more, willing to try something else, or they could just be quite simply bored because a lot of
Right.
people are at home right now looking for things to do. So there is definitely a really unique opportunity that everyone should take advantage of. And so we have just hit time. So Josh, I want to once again thank you so much for taking some time to spend with us this morning and now into afternoon. We really appreciate it. From running Figure One, plus everything you're doing in the intensive care units too. We really appreciate you spending some time to talk with us, especially to help kind of provide some insight from your experience with the Hack the Curve participants. And then, of course, as I said before, thank you to you and everyone else on the front line who continues to help, you know, flatten the curve and provide, amazing services and resources to everywhere, once again, across the world. Thank you so much again, Josh. We really
Thank you,
appreciate
Shane. Thanks for having me. Thanks everybody for attending.
it. Okay. All right. Well, take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. And we will see all of you next week with our next workshop. And Josh, once again, thank you so much for participating. We really appreciate it.